All right, in this video we are going to talk about factoring trinomials, and so that would be a specifically quadratic trinomial that looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay. Um, you may have your own technique that you have learned in high school or elsewhere for factoring this, and if so, then if that's working for you, then absolutely you use that technique that you feel comfortable with, and that is giving you correct answers. So by all means, you don't even have to pay attention to this if you don't want to. If you've got a method that works for you, so this video is intended for people who are rusty on factoring trinomials that look like this, and don't either have their own method or forget what the method they learned is. Okay, I like this method that I'm about to show you because I think it's pretty fault tolerant. You can make lots of mistakes and um, or do different things, and it won't cause problems with this method. So it works in a lot of situations. And then I also like it because it breaks out the difficult part of factoring these trinomials into the first step. So you kind of get that difficult part out of the way up front, which is something I like. Okay. All right. So just to show you the example that we're going to work here in a minute or two, is something that looks like this. We have 4x squared plus 15x minus 4. And I'm going to be talking about the numbers a and c, right? And the number a is going to be the number that's with x squared. So in this case, it's the 4. And the c, right, is going to be this constant, the number without the x. So in this case, it's a negative 4. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So to factor these trinomials, what I'm going to do is first find two numbers that multiply to give me AC. So that's what you get when you multiply the number that's with x squared times the constant number. So we're going to be looking for two numbers that multiply to give AC, but that add up to give the number B. Okay? And once you find those two numbers, that's the difficult part of all this, okay, in my opinion. The rest of it is just a little bit of algebra and then factoring by grouping that we talked about in a previous video. So if you are looking to use this method and you haven't watched the factoring by grouping video, make sure that you watch that before doing this. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this specific example. So in this example, we have 4x squared plus 15x minus 4. All right, and we want to factor this polynomial. All right, so the first step in factoring is always to look for the greatest common factor, right? That is the largest factor that will go into all of these factors evenly. So looking at the numbers first, I have a 4, a 15, and a 4. And the largest number that is going to go into all of those evenly, or the largest integer that goes into all those evenly, is a 1. So that's not really helpful for breaking that down. And then also for these variables, x's, this term has 2x, this term has 1, and this term has none. So they don't even have an x in common. So the greatest common factor is 1. Again, that's not really helpful for breaking this down. All right, so then the next thing is look at the number of terms that it has, and it has 3 terms, right? And so we are going to, generally in our class, you're going to apply this technique and factor it using the method that I'm going to show you. All right, so this method is sometimes called the AC method, right? Because what you want to do is to look for two numbers that multiply to give you A times C. So the A, right, remember, is this number with the x squared, or the squared term, right? And then C would be the constant term. So the number with the x squared is a positive 4, and this constant term is a negative 4. All right, so AC is going to be 4 times a negative 4, which is a negative 16. All right, so we're going to be looking for two numbers that multiply to give us a negative 16, but that add up to give us the number in this middle term right here, which is a positive 15. Okay, so that's what we're doing, and it really doesn't matter what method you are using, right? When you factor a polynomial, well, there's lots of different methods and techniques. In the end, you're solving. That's the problem that you're solving. You're finding two numbers uh, that multiply to give you a C and add up to give you that middle number, which is B. Okay. So again, that's one of the reasons I like this method. It gets the difficult part out, out up front, and you take care of it. And it's pretty easy to do this. What I'm going to do is start making a list of all the ways that I can multiply to get a positive 16. I'm going to ignore these signs for the minute, right? And just list out all the ways I can multiply two positive integers to get 16. So 1 would be 1 times 16, right? And that's 1 times the number is always the one that you would start with. And then you can actually list out all possibilities. So I would go 2 times 8 is going to give me 16. If you are rusty on your arithmetic, right, then you can easily do this with a calculator, right? You would do 16 divided by 1, although hopefully nobody's doing that, right? 1 goes in evenly to 16, and then 2 goes in evenly, right? So I get 2 times 8, and then you could go 3 times 16, and notice how I get a decimal there, right? So that means, right, 3 does not go in evenly to 16. So then go to 4, and I get 4 times 4. So write down that possibility. Then 16 times 5. Nope. 16 times 6 times 7 times 8. Right? You'll get a 2 again. And then you can keep trying those, right? But what's going to happen is you're going to end up with 16 times 1 right here. And there's no point in going past 16, right? Because if you go past 16, then the number on the bottom is going to be bigger than the number on the top, right? When you're dividing by. So the result would be something less than 1, right? So you can just stop right there at 16. But it's actually really no point in going that far, right? Because you'll notice, hey, these factors in here, they start repeating each other, and that's going to happen, right? You can see right here I have 8 times 2. So somewhere along the line, right, the factors in this first column are going to get bigger than these, right? And so those are just repeats of the ones that are in the first part of the list. So there's really no point to going up even that far. So right here, you can stop when the number factor is equal to itself, or when this first number gets bigger than the second number. That's it. Those are the only possibilities that you have as far as integers go. All right, and so you can stop. And now what we're looking for here, right, in this list is two numbers that either add or subtract, right, to get 15. So if I look at 1 plus 16, I get 17. If I do 16 minus 1, I get 15. So that is looking pretty good as far as that number right there. And in fact, you can see with any of these numbers here, 2 plus 8 is 10. That's not close to 15. If I do 8 minus 2, that's 6. And 4 plus 4 is 8. 4 minus 4 is 0. So you can see that it's going to be, if this works out, it's probably going to be this one right here. Okay. So 1 and 16, I am honing in on that particular combination because of the fact that 16 minus 1 is positive 15. So the next thing is you got to make sure that you get the signs right in here, and be careful about the signs. Because and the signs, right, if I look, I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 16, right? So if I'm multiplying two numbers and they come out to be a negative number, I know that the only way that that can happen, right, is for one number to be positive and the other number to be negative. So one of these numbers has to be positive, the other has to be negative. All right, and so it's either -1 and +16, or it's going to be 1 and -16. And I can see that, remember, these two numbers have to add up to give you 15. All right, so that means it has to be 16 and -1, right? Because -1 plus 16 is a +15. All right. It can't be the other way, 1 and -16, because that would add up to give me a -15 here. So you do have to pay attention to the signs of these numbers, okay, and how that works. So if you haven't done this in a while and are rusty in this, you might say, man, that's kind of a lot of work. But to me, this is the quickest way to get to what you need in general. Sometimes you can just look at this and tell what the numbers are going to be. And the more you do it, probably easier it gets. You might not need to make this little chart up here. All right, but for the more complicated problems, this chart, making this chart, gives you a way to systematically try all of the possibilities. And to me, if you're on a test trying to do this, it's nice to have a systematic method where you know, hey, I've tried all of the possibilities, right? So that's why I prefer this method. Okay. All right, so now that I've found the two numbers, these were the two numbers that I'm looking for, what do I do with them? All right, so what you do with these numbers in the AC method is that you use those two numbers to split up this middle term right in here, okay? So to split up that middle term, it's a 15. I could write that as -1x plus 16x, like so. All right, and then -4. And I usually don't write -1x here, but I just really want to make it explicit how these two numbers that you find are being used. Okay, so you can see I have -1x here and 16x right here. All right, and you may say, well, wow, that seems really odd, and it kind of does, because normally you're going the other way. Normally you're combining like terms, right, most of the time, and you would say, oh, -1x plus +16x gives me 15x, right? And so you would simplify things. Here we're kind of making things less simple, right? But there's a good reason for doing that. Is because we want to factor this out, okay? So you can see this expression right here is exactly the same. If I simplified this, I would wind up with exactly what I have here. And now this expression has 4 terms. So what I am going to do is to factor by grouping. Now you might say, hey, well, it doesn't matter if I put the 16x first and then the -1x second. And the answer to that one is no. In this type of problem in the AC method, right, these two numbers, if you can find these two numbers, that means that this is going to factor, and it doesn't matter what order you put them in. Okay, the steps might look slightly different, but that's about it. All right, so next up, I am factoring by grouping. All right, so here I look at the first two terms. They have an x in common, so I'm going to factor that out. When I factor out the x out of 4x squared, I'm going to be left with 4x. When I factor out this -1, the x out of the -1x, I'm going to be left with a -1. All right, and then I'm going to look at the next two terms and see what they have in common, right? They have a factor of 4 in common, 16. So, and -4, I'm going to factor that out. So 16 divided by 4 would be 4x. And then -4 divided by a +4 is going to give me a -1. And remember, in factoring by grouping, what you're hoping for is that the two expressions inside the parentheses here are exactly the same, right? That is critical, because what you want to do is then factor that out, right? So remember, you have two big terms like this, and now those two big terms have a common factor, right? And that common factor is 4x minus 1. It might look strange, right? But it is common to both of these things, and so you can pull it out. Then look at each of these big terms and decide what's left after you pull out that 4x minus 1. So over on this one, it would be that x. Don't forget to take this sign right with you down here. And then what would be left from this big term after the 4x minus 1 term has been factored out? It would be a 4. Okay, so you can see that this now is factored completely. Okay, so I've now, right here, I was adding and subtracting, right, in the original polynomial, and now I am multiplying. If I take 4x minus 1 and times it by x plus 4, then that is will come out to be this original expression that we had. Okay. All right. So that's it on the AC method. I'm going to stop this video right here, and then I will post another video after this where I've got another example of the AC method if you want to take a look at that one.